This is focusing on Descartes' Rule of Signs. It's identifying how many possible positive or negative zeros there might be. This is the definition. You don't need to write it down. I think you'll understand it when we do an example. The first example, consider the polynomial. We want to find out how many possible positive roots there are. So we're looking for sign changes. So sign changes mean things going from a positive sign to a negative sign. So we look at this function, f of x. We start off with this positive, and we have our first sign change right here, going from a positive over here to a negative. So there's one sign change. Then we have another sign change going from this negative over to that positive. We ignore all the negatives in here. These are all negatives. Then our last sign change is going from this positive to this negative. So we say there are 3 sign changes. So that means there's a maximum of 3 possible positive roots or zeros. To find the negatives of the zero, you have to evaluate that function. So if here's my function right here that I just used, I have to evaluate the function for f of negative x. So let's pretend we've already done the evaluation of it, and this is what the function looks like. We have to count out how many sign changes there will be to tell you how many negative roots there are. So this function now, after we evaluate it, goes from a negative to a positive. So there's one sign change. And then it goes from a positive to a negative, so there's a second sign change. And then it goes from a negative to a positive. And the last one, all of these terms are all the same. They're all negatives. So we're going to our negative. So we have 4 sign changes. That means we have up to a maximum of 4 negative roots or zeros of the function. We'll do an example here again. If here is my function, I'm going from a sign change from a positive to a negative. And then from, if you notice, these are negatives, and we're going over to one positive. So that means we have 2 sign changes. That means we have 2 positive possible roots in this example. If we take that function and we evaluate it, so here's the evaluation of it, and we get this function right here, how many sign changes will there be? So we have 2 negatives in a row. The first sign change happens from the negative to the positive, and then we have 2 more positives. So we only have 1 sign change. So that means you have 1 possible negative zero. If we scroll down and look at this graph of this function, this cubic function, pretend we use our graphing calculator, here is our negative function, our negative 0, and then we have a positive 1 and a positive 1. We could not have any more negative zeros, just the one we have here, and we could have no more than these 2 zeros here in the positive. And that's what Descartes' Rule of Signs says. It tells us how many possible positive zeros there are and how many negative zeros are. When you do Descartes for the positive, you just leave the original function as it is. As for the negatives, you have to evaluate the function for negative x first. And that's what this is all doing here. Then check for the sign changes.